feel very called to become a member of the Catholic Church.
Love the Catholic Church. It's just the best place to be.
From the studios of EWTN, this is Open Line. In North America, call toll-free 1-800-585-9396. That's 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985. You can also send an email to openline@ewtn.com.
A tremendous Friday to each and every one of you. You know, Colin, I've worked jobs where everybody raced to work on Friday because they knew they were going to get to race home for the weekends. But here at EWTN, we race to work on Fridays because we get to be working at EWTN.
That's right. And there's a lot of good to be done, and it's a lot of fun.
You know, I always, if I ever get harried or bogged down with everything, I remind myself that I have the great privilege of working as the crow flies about 50 feet from the Blessed Sacrament, so I probably don't have too much to worry about.
That's true. For those watching on YouTube or wherever, it's approximately in that direction.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, not very far.
Not very far, truly.
Yeah. So 1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. Those are the dulcet tones of our Vice President of Theology, Mr. Colin Donovan. He's here to take your questions today on theology and church teaching. The number's 1-800-585-9396. That's toll-free anywhere in North America. 2 lines open. They're filling up quick. If you're outside the United States and Canada, we've got a line for you. That number is 1-205-271-2985. That's 205-271-2985, preceded by the country code of 1. You can send us an email, openline@ewtn.com, or you can text your question to Colin. Text the letters EWTN to 55000. Wait for a response. Text your first name and your question. Message and data rates may apply. I'm Jack Williams, the lovely and talented Elena Rodriguez producing the program. Your call screener is Mr. Matt Gubensky, and as a host, as he is every Friday, except when they throw me out of the studio and do Theology Roundtable, is our Vice President of Theology, Colin Donovan. You know, that hurts my feelings. Next week, you're going to throw me out. It's going to hurt my feelings.
I'll tell you what. I'm going to give Noah's spot to you, and you can be on the next roundtable. And we'll ask you all the tough questions.
Yeah, well, I'll pass.
Okay.
I'm a lot of things, but one thing I am not. I am no Noelette. So
okay.
of that, you can be sure. 1-800-585-9396. One line open for you here for Colin Donovan. We've got an email. A question about incorruptibility. Dear Colin, can you explain incorruptibility? I understand that it could be a foreshadowing of the perfected bodies we can hope to receive in heaven, but why are only a selected few saints found to be incorruptible? And that's from Blake right here in Summerton, Alabama.
Well, funny he should ask that question, because just today I posted on my personal Facebook page, not to be confused with the EWTN Facebook page, a picture of Jacinta of Fatima, Jacinta Marto, who was buried in 1920 after dying during this Spanish flu epidemic, which killed 30 million people, I believe, worldwide. And according to the civil law, they required to put quicklime in her casket and then bury her in the ground, that to destroy any possibility of communicating the epidemic. Workers or whomever might ever move that. And so what happened was when Fatima was approved in 1930 and a cause for the beatification and canonization of Jacinta and Francisco was established, one of the first things they do is locate the body and remove it. And when they did that, and this picture I posted shows Jacinta still in the casket, which is still in the ground, and you can see how the wood and the interior trappings of the casket have all deteriorated due to 15 years in the ground. Of course, the quicklime was on top of her. Her face is just beautiful, like she laid down to take a nap without any kind of corruption or anything. That is impossible, really, unless you believe in some local, warp of physics that allowed her to remain incorrupt. That has to be supernatural. And yes, it is. It is a preview of the resurrection. And God gives it where he may, not everybody who dies. Imagine if every Christian who died in the state of grace were incorrupt. Would anyone ever have, at a certain point you'd have to say, I better be a Christian. There wouldn't be faith involved.
Yeah.
There would no acceptance by your own reason of the credibility of the faith of Jesus' teaching and message, of the church and the sacraments and the authority of the hierarchy and so on. It wouldn't require faith. Everyone would be, in a sense, forced into it. But God gives miracles of incorruptibility or of other things in order to, every once in a while, give a little signpost to challenge the skeptic, to challenge the individual who may be motivated by nothing else, but never to impose. And there have been literally hundreds of these during the course of the history, and Jacinta being just one of the ones who has remained incorrupt. So it has that purpose, to point to heaven where there is no imperfection, there is no suffering, everything is glory, and therefore also to point to the bodily resurrection at the end of time that will precede our eternity as whole individuals, body and soul, in eternal life, which has two destinies, with God or without God. And we get to choose in this life which of those we choose, which of those we want.
Have you viewed an incorrupt?
In Rome, yeah, there are incorrupts in churches there and elsewhere, and yes, I have.
Yeah, I have not had the privilege. I understand. If you could pick one, where would you go? I think I would, from what I've been told, St. Bernadette.
I have not seen St. Bernadette.
It's spectacular. She's in a glass coffin.
You see the pictures of her, and clearly it's just
remarkable.
And what's interesting, and I think what makes the Jacinta picture very convincing is you find skeptical responses to that as to how she was the Egyptians knew how to mummify people and all of that. Or they've put wax over her and that's preserved her artificially. That can't be argued when you see the corruption of the casket and the interior of the casket and this sweet little face of this girl 15 years in quicklime in the ground and still preserved. You got to be pretty hard-hearted to say that that's a natural happening.
1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number, 1-800-585-9396. Colin Donovan, our Vice President of Theology, is in the house answering your questions about theology and church teaching. 1-800-585-9396. Open Line Friday with Colin Donovan.
I invite people to tune in to Women of Grace Live if they want to be encouraged, if they want to be instructed, if they want to be inspired. These opportunities present themselves not only through what we have to share on the air, but through the many calls that come in through our listeners. I am always amazed at how my own faith is edified through what our listeners share with us. I'm Janet Benkovic, inviting you to join me weekday mornings at 11 Eastern for Women of Grace on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
The National Catholic Register is America's most complete Catholic news source, with a comprehensive view of the world from a distinctly Catholic perspective. For the latest issues, people, and events shaping the world as we know it, visit ncregister.com.
I think I just found myself believing that I didn't need God. I just had everything under control, and church was actually a burden to me.
I might have gone to church, at Christmas time, gradually quit going.
No, I didn't take my faith seriously, which probably means I never really got it to begin with.
You can have a beautiful car, a big fancy home, but if you don't have Christ in your life, there's an emptiness that's there.
We are enslaved to power or to greed or to wealth or to lust, especially as a man. But there's a true freedom to not be enslaved, but to attach ourselves to God and to be free. Thank God I'm home.
Now that I'm back in the Catholic Church, I'm a new person. I love it.
There's peace in our home that we didn't have before.
You're coming home to a Catholic family where people today just embrace you.
If you've been away from the Catholic Church for whatever reason, we invite you to take another look. Visit CatholicsComeHome.org today.
This is Bishop Paul Bradley of the Diocese of Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Hi, this is Tim Staples from Catholic Answers Live.
This is Father John Ricardo. Thanks for listening to the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. If you have a question or comment, call 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985 or send an email to openline@ewtn.com.
1-800-585-9396. Elena Rodriguez, our lovely and talented producer, and I just shared a little inside joke, and Colin is looking at us like we have three heads. So
I'm just sitting here enjoying the antics.
Elena's been very busy this morning, and she kind of was forced to finish her lunch during the show today. So I'm giving her a little grief as she constructs her sandwich over here. 1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. Our leadoff hitter today is Julia in the great state of Washington. She's listening on the EWTN app. Julia, thanks for holding on. You're on with Colin.
Hi.
Hey, Julia. What's up?
Yes. I just had a question about the doctrines and teachings of the faith.
Mm-hmm.
I've Catholic homeschooled my children for the last 15-plus years using the St. Elizabeth Ann Seton curriculum.
God bless you, Julia.
Yeah, it's quite intense, but, it's awesome. Let's see. I've gone to daily Mass with all 6 children for the last 22 years. When I approached our priest to have my youngest son confirmed, he denied me to confirm him. Unless I took him to Sunday school class.
Mm-hmm.
I told him I would do the curriculum at home, whatever he wanted. I told him we'd do St. Elizabeth and Seton. All the Sunday school teachers in the past were like, for kids know everything. They answer all the questions. It's really frustrating for me to follow the teachings of the faith for 22 plus years. That's when I became Catholic, actually about 24 years ago. And then have our priest, what I feel is go against the teachings of our faith and allow the parents to teach their children. I told them we go to daily Mass. You could question my son. What a beautiful thing. You could do this one-on-one time. He had the time. But he just said no. I said, you're refusing. And he said, no. I said, well, you're giving an ultimatum. And he said, unless he goes to the Sunday school class 1 hour a week, he will not be confirmed. My question is this the teachings of our faith?
Well, it's not a matter of teaching. It's a matter of discipline, which is under the authority of the church. The parents are the primary educators, but the church has a responsibility to ensure that the children are properly prepared for confirmation. You clearly understand that because you offered to have your son tested, so as it were. I think in many places they do require attendance at confirmation classes. They may be loath to make exceptions because exceptions tend to become the norm when you do that. I think your option there, because it's a matter of policy and that judgment and how to fulfill the obligation of the church to determine the fitness and preparation of somebody for a sacrament, I think your option there is, if you're not satisfied with what the pastor is telling you, is to appeal to the bishop. That is your right to do that. There's nothing that would help you in asserting that you have a right to do this on your own apart from the parish, but on the other hand, there's nothing to say that you ultimately must absolutely be obliged. It's at the discretion of the pastor and ultimately of the bishop, and so that's how you have to deal with it and resolve it that way within the context of what is the diocese policies? Are you complying with the policies? If they don't generally make exceptions, can you get an exception? And I think if you look at it that way, also with the disposition that one of the characteristics of the church is submission to the authority of the bishop ultimately. And, if you go at it that way, you may have a different result, or you may not have a result. But it's not a matter of teaching. It is within the prudential judgment of the bishop as to how those matters are determined in the diocese, and what exceptions can be made from a policy that he's established.
Does that help at all, Julia?
Well, a little bit. The thing is, my son was already confirmed through a different priest, who we've known for 20 plus years.
Well, I don't get then that he's being confirmed again.
He's not being confirmed again. My question about our parish priest, because the only parish that has daily mass is this one. So I'm not going to switch parishes because of differences. But my question is, when I quoted canon law, and that's you are not allowed to refuse a willing participant the sacraments of the church.
Which sacrament are you wanting your son to participate in?
Well, this was before I got him confirmed through the other parish. But
and he's confirmed.
When I confronted him, I said, how can you say you're not refusing him? He's a willing participant. He is educated. You're not even giving him a chance. How is
so
that?
You're talking about past history. You've managed to get him confirmed, and you're perpetuating your argument with the pastor.
I'm not perpetuating it. I guess the thing that is underlying now is that we continue to go to daily mass, and it's like my parents are saying, they have to go to CCD. And I don't trust this priest. I don't trust he's going to teach the Catholic faith.
Well, pray for him then.
Yeah, and keep in mind also that canon law itself even has to be read in context, because if a canon actually says that he cannot refuse a willing participant the sacraments, they're clearly not making a blanket statement over all seven sacraments. Because if my daughter were to approach a priest as a willing participant, he's not going to bestow the sacrament of holy orders upon her.
Yeah, I think maybe it's more complex than it's being, conveyed here. In all of these cases, there's a role for the parent, there's a role for the church. One of the things that distinguishes the Catholic Church from the non-Catholic churches, other than the Orthodox churches, is it's a very hierarchical nature, and that's responsibility is given to the bishop. The bishop shares it with the pastors whom he puts in certain offices. That gives them authority. That doesn't mean they can't make prudential mistakes. They can't violate canon law. They can't make theological errors and applications of church teaching and policy practices and canons. But at the same time as, we're obliged to that. Otherwise, we break communion in the church. So there is a way to go about that and to approach resolution of those kinds of issues. There is not the freedom, and ultimately, if we judge that we're not being given our lawful freedom, then we have to appeal to the next higher authority. Above the pastor is the bishop. Above the bishop is the Holy See, the Pope, and those who work for him in the various Vatican departments. So I think that ecclesiology, as it's called, has to be the framework in which we address these kinds of problems in parish. We are a homeschooling family as well. We're coming up on our daughter's first communion probably within the next year. The general practice here is second grade, and we will go to the pastor, and I'd love to teach her myself, but if that's the policy of the parish, then we'll go through that policy. So you have to be prepared to do that. And I think sometimes we forget that people in authority, that when you make an exception here, 10 other people come along and say, can I have this exception? And that's not always very practical, whether it's adult confirmations for people coming into the church. A pastor may, by exception, give somebody a very quick, personal catechesis to prepare them for confirmation, for reception into the church. But he can't do that as people come in through the course of the year and say, I want to be received into the church. So we have the RCIA program. So it's a case of where there is an approach that the church uses, but there can be legitimate and reasonable exceptions. And if you don't think you're getting a reasonable exception, then you'll say, well, Father, I'm going to have to bring this to the bishop, because I think that that's not a just application of it in our particular situation.
And that's always a recourse that someone has.
This is in canon law as well, that we have this right of recourse if we think a wrong judgment by the law or doctrine is being made by someone in authority. We always have that appeal to somebody higher in authority.
And we should always probably bear in mind that the obedient road is not always the easiest path.
It is not, and no one guarantees that it isn't full of suffering and difficulty. In many ways, having gone through the 60s and 70s in the church, you routinely talked with like-minded people about the white martyrdom that many experienced in the church, precisely because of the difficulties in those days. That's far less the case today. In fact, I think it's quite rare that being a faithful Catholic leads to persecution, although it does occur. But always the way in which a Catholic should resolve those things is the same: in unity of truth and charity, in communion with the bishop and the Holy Father.
God bless you, Julia. I admire the choices that you've made and the way that you're bringing up your family. Next stop for us is Kansas City, Missouri. Kelsey is in Kansas City listening to EWTN on KEXS Radio. Kelsey, you're on with Colin Donovan.
Hi, my question is for you that you wear a cross as an outward expression of your Christian faith, but on the scapulars and the miraculous medals, what is the purpose to wearing those as an expression of the Catholic faith?
Well, in all cases, any kind of religious iconography, whether it's a cross or a crucifix or a painting of the Holy Family or a miraculous medal or scapular, all of these are meant to be expressions of faith in a particular reality. The Catholic Church is very incarnational. That's seen in the sacramental system, that's seen in the real solid marks of truth, her doctrines, of the means of salvation incarnate in the sacraments, and of the means of pastorship that you find in the hierarchy of the Church. And so whatever the thing may be, whether it's a cross or a crucifix or a medal of some kind or a picture of Our Lady or of St. Joseph or St. Therese of Lisieux, all of these things are ways of manifesting externally and representing externally something that you internally believe that is true. Obviously, the redemption represented in the crucifix, the incarnation and redemption, Christ on the cross, very stark representation of that redemption. In something Marian, such as a miraculous medal, or the scapular, which also has it is a recognition of Mary's role in the economy of salvation, determined by God Himself. Likewise, with a medal or an object related to a particular saint, these are incarnational signs, if you will, of faith in the communion of saints, that what they have accomplished as disciples of Christ, we too can accomplish. The Church has identified them as saints because they lived the Christian walk and they excelled at it in heroic virtue, and this is something we aspire to, and we take them as models. In the same way, if you're a football player, you would take some great quarterback or lineman or something as a model in your profession. Well, our profession is to become holy, to become saints, and the saints are models of that. Now, in the particular case of the miraculous medal and the scapulars, they have particular origins. In the case of the miraculous medal, that was an actual apparition. That was Mary appearing to Catherine Labouré in Paris in the 1800s, and sort of previewing what would happen later on, and that is the declaration of the Immaculate Conception. And so this medal of the Immaculate Conception, as it's formally called, acquired the name of miraculous medal because miracles seemed to be happening for those who called on Mary's intercession through this means. And so
Kelsey,
it's
hang
an
on the line.
expression of the faith.
Colin will put a bow on this in 1 second. Open Line Friday rolls on with Colin Donovan.
More to Life with Dr. Greg and Lisa Popcak.
More to Life is about living the Catholic difference in our marriages, our families, the way we approach life in general.
It's about celebrating life and our Catholic faith and discovering all the ways God wants to bless us and help us be a blessing to others.
More to Life with Dr. Greg and Lisa Popcak. Weekdays, 10 a.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
EWTN Radio Classics is our 24/7 teaching and devotionals channel featuring Mother Angelica, Patrick Madrid, Father Benedict Groeschel, and more. Find them online at EWTNradio.net. Now available on the EWTN app.
60 on 10 with Monsignor Charles Pope.
The second commandment, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. The disclosure of a name in the ancient world belonged to the order of trust and intimacy. And so when God revealed his name to Moses, it was an extraordinary outreach to us, saying that we were called to an intimate, trusting relationship with him. And so we should always reverence this name as a great, great gift. We should obviously never use God's name to curse or to blaspheme or to berate others. That's wholly inappropriate. God's name is meant to bring blessing. And likewise, the vain use. Vain means empty. And so some of these expressions like, oh my God, or, and so on, need to be avoided as well. Vain means empty, and those are using God's name as an empty kind of expression of exasperation. And then finally, never ever to use God's name to swear an oath falsely. The second commandment, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
This is Bishop Robert Barron of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles.
I'm Dr. Greg Popcak.
This is Lauren Ashburn, Chief White House Correspondent and Political Director for EWTN News Nightly. Thanks for listening to EWTN Radio.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. If you have a question or comment, call 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985 or send an email to openline@ewtn.com.
1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. Be sure to keep it right here as soon as we're done. Cresta in the afternoon. Direct to my desk. Call in and ask the questions that you'd like to hear an answer to from Al Cresta. That's 4 Eastern right here on EWTN Radio. We've got an interesting text, Colin, that you've seen, I know, in the
Well,
in the
were we
past.
going to finish? We should just finish
Kelsey,
off
I am so sorry. Thank you for holding on. Colin was going to finish his answer. I
don't think there's
I beg
much
your
more to
forgiveness,
it.
Kelsey. I completely forgot.
I don't think there's much more to it. It's just it's a continuation of the same principle that the incarnation happened, and that the faith is something concrete, and therefore you can represent it in concrete signs. And so whether it's an icon on the wall or in a church, a statue in a church or in the home, a scapular worn to manifest one's consecration to Mary as the way to go to Jesus, as an imitation of her discipleship of her Son. All of these things are practical ways to express a supernatural faith in salvation as revealed by God in Scripture and in sacred tradition.
Is that helpful for you, Kelsey?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate you holding
God
on.
bless.
1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. Now we'll get to the text from Mark, and he says, when Jesus instituted the Eucharist at the Last Supper, did he receive himself, and what meaning did it have versus us receiving him?
There's no indication that. It says he took it, he broke it, the bread, and gave it, and said, this is my body, which will be given up for you. In the context of the Passover meal, they would have shared what's called the ophicomon, which is a little piece of the Sabbath bread, which is broken off, of the Passover bread, which is broken off, and shared as a sign of communion. In a way, Holy Communion is for us a sharing in that. But that Christ received himself on that occasion, since he was taking an old tradition and giving it a new meaning, that wasn't necessary for him. He was the author of that He was the author of the Old Tradition as well, but he was the author of the New Covenant, and so it wouldn't have been necessary for him to, obviously, and we're not told that he did.
Right. Next up, Ottawa, Illinois. Reverend Ken is in Ottawa, Illinois, listening to EWTN Radio. He's a retired military chaplain. Reverend Ken, thank you for your service.
Well, so you're welcome. I'm happy to have served. My question is concerning communion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Protestant minister, and as a chaplain, you have to relate to all different faith groups, and I always had the situation where I wasn't quite sure of how to handle communion. For instance, I did part of my undergraduate work at a Catholic college, and they invited me to speak, and they gave me communion. I did the same thing at a hospital that I did a chaplaincy at, Alexian Brothers Hospital, and I was allowed to take communion. And my problem that I have is that in my tradition, I'm not allowed, or my convictions are that I'm not to turn anybody away if they've examined themselves. So, how can I respect Catholicism considering these circumstances?
Sure. Well, in the Catholic tradition, we would have to say that their giving you communion was naughty. They should not have done that. Communion, of course, is the source and summit of the Church's life, as the Second Vatican Council taught. It builds up the Church, but you are not a member of the Church. You are in, as the Council also taught, in relationship to the Church, we believe, because of baptism in Christ, but not formally accepting the role which we teach Christ gave the Church to do as the sign of salvation in the world, the sign of God's gathered people. Then you can't make that statement and through your action of receiving communion or of the minister of Holy Communion in the Catholic Church giving you communion. So this is, for example, by analogy, the example would be, what if a Catholic went to an Orthodox church? From the Catholic point of view, Catholics would be allowed to receive Orthodox Holy Communion because we believe they have the hierarchy, they have holy orders, all their 7 sacraments are valid. But as a matter of charity and diplomacy, you might say, a Catholic shouldn't do that without the permission of the Orthodox pastor because they have stricter rules. So that kind of comity, I think, is also what the Church is looking for here. I think it's from the Catholic point of view, it's not a statement about anything about the person who can't receive, other than a factual statement that they are not part of the Catholic Church, and so should not be given communion. There would be exceptional cases, and because you were in the military, there could very well be occasions. As you probably know, I don't know if you served in wartime, but when I was in the 70s, the chaplains that I knew, and I served as a Catholic lay leader aboard ship, the chaplains that I knew working out of Pearl Harbor or on ships in the Pacific, when they were in the battlefields with the Marines in Vietnam, for example, they may have occasion to give Catholic sacraments to non-Catholics, say the anointing of the sick, to hear their confession, to baptize the unbeliever who said, Father, I want to receive, I want to be a Christian, I want to receive baptism. So there can be the exceptional situations where there's not the normal catechesis or the normal preparation or the normal pathway of reception into the Church. The Church allows for all of those. But as a normal pattern, outside of the hardship of, I'm an Anglican, I'm here in wherever, South Korea, let's say, although there are probably Anglican churches there. I'm here for a year. There's no Anglican church nearby. I believe in the Eucharist. Father, may I receive? It could be granted in that situation because of the seriousness of the lack of the minister of the person's own faith. So there are situations where the Church allows that by exception, But the normal thing is that in the everyday life in America, there's no shortage of Lutheran, Catholic, Pentecostal, and other churches for people to go to that is their own church. And so there is generally not going to be a reason to give the sacraments, other than in an emergency situation. In a natural disaster, an earthquake, people dying. Father, I'd like to confess, but I'm not Catholic. A priest would hear that confession. But that again is an extraordinary situation. So that's sort of the practice, Reverend Ken, that has been followed in the church and is mandated by the church's law and the theology behind the discipline of law.
Does that make sense to you?
Well, and my question, that's all from the Catholic standpoint. I want to show respect for the Catholic Church and its beliefs. And I have a situation where in our theology, am I doing something to offend the Catholic Church if a Roman Catholic takes communion from me?
Yes, in a way. Unless you are of a community that has orders recognized by the Catholic Church, we would not see that as Jesus Christ. Now, that would be the Catholics' mistake for thinking that they were receiving the same thing as in the Catholic Church. In other words, by a priest who at the long line of apostolic succession has the orders communicated to the apostles at the Last Supper and exercise those orders to say, this is my body, this is my blood. So not seeing that you have that, the Catholic should know better. I think I don't necessarily think it's your job to inform them of what they ought to know, but to maybe demur from doing it in that situation.
God bless you, Reverend Ken. We appreciate all the work that you've done. 1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. Next up is Lawrence. He's in Grand Rapids, Michigan, listening to EWTN on Holy Family Radio. Lawrence, you're on with Colin Donovan.
Hey, good afternoon.
Hey, Lawrence.
I had a question regarding Epiphany and the events surrounding that. It got me thinking a few weeks ago when we celebrated that, the gospel reading laid out the series of events with the three wise men following the star from the east and checking in with Herod. Herod summoning the Jewish leadership. The Jewish leadership then told Herod the story behind the coming of the Messiah and the signs to look out for. I was wondering if the star that the wise men were following was visible to everybody, or if it was just made visible to them based on God's wisdom. And if it wasn't visible to everybody, and the Jews knew what to look out for, why they refused to see it and refused to follow it, and if it was visible to everybody, was that the first sign of the Jews' rejection of Christ as the Messiah?
Wow, you've really thought this through. Maybe more than I have.
all these thoughts just popped into my head.
Okay. Well, let's see where we can go with them. Well, we're sort of in a facts not in evidence, to judge from situation there. We know that the Magi, who were, let's a little bit about who the Magi were. There were a class of, you might call them priests, you might call them intellectuals in some of the ancient societies. The wise men, they knew about astronomy, they knew mathematics, they were sort of the intellectual class of the Babylonian Empire, and probably others as well. They may have been present among the Celts and others too, as we see that astronomy and math spread through them into England and Ireland and other places. But that this class of individuals, obviously with the sort of natural religion of the times, also then looked to the stars, what we would call astrology, in order to foretell events and so on and so forth. So it seems that God used an event that happened in the heavens. This is one of really two options, I think. He either used an event which providentially occurred at this time to interest and attract the Magi to go on their path, and as a consequence of which, having searched the Jewish scriptures is the supposition. Remember that the Jews were in Babylon, that many Jews remained in Babylon, and Jews remained in Babylon into our own day, as a matter of fact, since that time, or Iraq, as we call it today, and that in doing so, they read the signs to indicate a new king for the Jewish people, for the Israelites. And this is what led them on their journey. That could mean that everybody saw this event and maybe didn't know how to interpret it. They didn't have the presuppositions that the Magi, the Chaldees, had to lead to the conclusion, or some did and others didn't. Probably the priestly class of Israel, because they were forbidden any kind of astrological, belief in the stars and so on, as, connected to providence in any way, that they would not have looked to the heavens to figure this out at all. But having this information being brought to them as Herod did when the Magi came to him, they answered his question about it and came up with, and you, Bethlehem, Ephrata, and so on. And we know the rest of the history. So whether it was a natural event that providentially used by God to bring the Magi with their astrological and scientific and historical interest, or whether it was a supernatural event that, seen or unseen according to the will of God, then we simply don't know. But I think the main thing is that what it clearly in Scripture dissuaded many of the Jews from accepting and receiving Jesus had nothing to do with the star, the reality of that at all. It had to do with the claims of Jesus and the strict monotheism of Mosaic religion as passed down. And the indications that Jesus gave during his public ministry through the miracles did very little to break that, although it attracted the simple people. It seems after his resurrection, it seemed from some histories, it appears as if many of the Jewish priests came into the church in the first years, and that this provoked the crisis which led to persecution of the church in the Holy Land, the flight of the apostles certainly, and ultimately the Council of Yamnia anathematizing all of those who followed this new sect. So it had very little to do with Bethlehem, which was done quietly in a corner to the knowledge of shepherds, Jewish shepherds and Gentile intellectuals. And thus Christ manifested himself to the world. And to Herod as well, who then put the holy innocents to death. So I think historically that's about what we can say as to the nature of the star. That's a great debate. We've aired some things on EWTN that attempt to find providential occurrences where stars and different things. I forget the gentleman's name, but the best one is a study which seems fairly conclusive to me, that moves the date of Christ's birth from the 4 to 6 BC range to about the 2 BC range, and shows many of the elements that you would think to find if you were an astrologer looking for these things. All of that is not to say that there is any validity to astrology, but rather that God meets us where we are and uses that to draw us out of error to truth. And he did that with the Magi, and he continues to do it with people today.
Does that do anything for you, Lawrence?
It does, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad have some other insight on that. I've been pondering that for a few weeks now. So
okay.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the phone call, Lawrence. We appreciate it.
You. God bless.
God bless you. 1-800-585-9396. You know, Colin, I was looking this morning on the internet, and there was a beautiful little horizontal timeline diagram of the liturgical calendar of the church, which the liturgical calendar of the church is one of the great blessings as a convert that I've found about our faith, and it was very concisely put, and it was on Church Pop.
Yes, at EWTN.
Yes. I get a little email every morning with some little snippet of something that's on Church Pop, and
now, how do you sign up for that? You go to Church Pop, and then
I'm going to tell you.
Oh, good.
It's the newest member of the EWTN family. It's got new online Christian content that's fun and inspiring every single day. You can find it on Snapchat, you can find it on Instagram, or on the web at churchpop.com. So you can sign up at churchpop.com, and they'll send you just not annoying, just one friendly little reminder.
No, and the articles are nice and short, beautiful graphics. It's not like these windy theologians they get on open line.
Lord have mercy.
Yeah, Lord have mercy.
I have to psych myself up to come in here on Friday. 1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. Again, that's churchpop.com. To Cincinnati, Ohio we go. Maria's in Cincinnati listening to EWTN on Sacred Heart Radio. Maria, thanks for holding. You're on with Colin Donovan.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Colin, Donovan, and Jack. Thank you so much. I have a question concerning when is it acceptable for Catholics to pursue divorce? I have a spouse who's been telling me for the last 10 years that I should divorce him. Lately, he is becoming more aggressive about it, ordering me to go and get a divorce. I need to go and divorce him, and I need to leave. I have been reticent. Have not been obeying that command, of course. But lately, concerning things that should not have been a big problem, he made it a big problem and insisted that I need to go and get a divorce. And the prudent part of me is saying, maybe he's trying to tell me something, and maybe I should try to protect my child, because I do have a child with special needs. And myself, he's seeming to want to make me leave the home, which would not be a good idea for my instability of the child or anything like that.
Sure.
So I'm thinking maybe I should go and get a divorce, so that, because I told him if he wants out of the marriage, he should be the one who files and leaves, not me.
Now, you were married in the church, so you're certain.
I am a recent convert.
Okay.
That's part of the bone of contention right there.
Sure. Yeah.
And he doesn't think he can live with me anymore. Or he wants to. He told me he doesn't want to live with me anymore, but neither of us are leaving the house. Me, because I need to keep my daughter stable, and I don't have a means. I've been a home mom for the past 5 years, and him, just because he feels that it's his house, and therefore, so he's asking me to get a divorce and leave him. Should I pursue? Would it be sinful for me to do such a thing?
I wouldn't presume to know without more details, and those wouldn't be fitting on air. Here's what the church generally does in that. For people who are married in the church, they should not be getting a divorce without getting spiritual counsel first. And in fact, to separate by canon law, they would need to have the permission of the bishop. They're married before God in the church. The church has some responsibility there in God's name. So if a person were Catholic and they married in the Catholic Church, that would be the situation. And if there was an abusive marriage where there's violence and emotional abuse or any of that nature, those kinds of things for the safety of one of the spouses and children certainly allows to a lawful separation. And you can do that on your own in an emergency, but to formalize that, you should approach the bishop through his helpers in the diocese, the priests. Now, in your situation, because you are coming, you're coming into the church, it would depend on what his situation is spiritually, baptized or not baptized. But if it would become necessary to leave the home, that actually gives you many more options than would be for a Catholic, because the validity of the marriage and the possibility that the church can grant one or the other of Pauline or Petrine privileges, as they're called, which means essentially that divorce in the civil sense, but allows you to remake have a Catholic marriage with another person in the church sense. All of that you would need to get the advice of the officers of the church who are responsible for judicial care of marriages in the diocese. It would be worth having that conversation, I think, even if to know what those possibilities are, even if you don't think at this time that's necessary to leave the home. But you should at least know about that, because it could certainly, it sounds like, have some applicability in your situation. I don't know that it does, but I think to get informed, you should speak to someone at the diocese and walk them through this history and your personal circumstances.
Does that help, Maria?
Yes, that does help. Thank you so much. So what is the office in the diocese that I should contact?
You should just...
they all have different names depending upon the diocese. But if you just call the diocese and ask them for, the office of marriage or the office of the family, something
marriage
along
and family,
marriage and family.
Even the judicial vicar might be another name. They may give you somebody on staff, a lay person or a religious sister, to first talk to you. That could be what happens as well.
Okay, then. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Maria. We appreciate the phone call, and we and all of our listeners will certainly, definitely keep you in our prayers. Well, Colin, it goes by way too fast. Another hour has slipped away from us. Next week, it's Theology Roundtable on Friday, and the topic is still up in the air, huh?
We haven't decided on it yet. If we think that the world is coming to an end in a couple of weeks or so, we'll probably do it on that subject. But short of that possibility, we don't yet know.
Well, we look forward to hearing whatever you have to put up on next Friday. On behalf of our host, Mr. Colin Donovan, our producer, Elena Rodriguez, call screener Matt Kubensky, I'm Jack Williams. Thanks so much for taking a little time out of your Friday to join us on EWTN's Open Line. Back at it again on Monday. John Martinoni's in the house talking scriptural apologetics. Barbara McGuigan, the life issues on Tuesday. Wednesday, Father Mitch is in the house, and Father Larry will be here talking the new evangelization on Thursday. Until we get together next week, God bless.
Sorry, say again?
Where is this station? Georgia? Just says Athens. Now, the people listening presumably will know where they are, but
yeah,
I'm curious now, too. It's not Greece because it's got a W in the call sign.
Yeah, good observation. It has to be the U.S. But it could be Athens, Missouri, you know?
Well, it could be.
Yeah, let me
is Missouri on the K side of the Mississippi?
Half of Missouri is.
Okay,
like
the
St.
eastern
Louis,
half is W and the other side's K?
Some of the St. Louis stations are... It depends on where they have like their tower or something. Might have a W.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Good observation. Yes.
Yeah,
Let me.
Well, that was naval communications.
It would not be Athens, Missouri, because Athens, Missouri would be a K. But
that's true.
Let me double check just in case.
Well, I'm not going to mention it, so they'll know where they are. I'll just do the thing. That's fine.
Yeah, that's true.
Let me know when I can go.
Yes. Very good.
One time or twice or what?
Let's do twice, just in case, please. And I am recording. Thank you so much for doing this.
Hello, this is Colin Donovan from the Friday edition of Open Line in the EWTN Theology Roundtable, and you're listening to Athens Catholic Radio, 105.7 FM, WXPB-LP, Athens.
All right, very good. And if you can pull your microphone just a tad bit farther from your mouth.
Farther?
There we go. There.
Okay.
There, that's good. Another take, please.
Hello, this is Colin Donovan from the Friday edition of Open Line in the EWTN Theology Roundtable. And you're listening to Athens Catholic Radio, 105.7 FM, WXPB-LP, Athens.
Thank you very much. That's great.
Very good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.